Is sitting for a large part of your day actually a risk to your health? Or is it just a part of modern life? What if one of the most normal things you do every day is quietly changing your metabolism, circulation, and even your long-term health? You've probably heard the phrase, sitting is the new smoking. And some people say it might be just as dangerous, which may sound extreme, but there's a reason that idea started to gain traction. Because the first changes in your body don't wait years to show up. They can start happening much sooner than most people realize. And it's not just about back pain or feeling stiff after a long day. Some of the earliest changes happen beneath the surface, where prolonged sitting can affect how your body handles glucose and can impair blood vessel function. So in this video, we're going to break down what happens after a few hours of sitting, what starts to change after days and weeks of doing it consistently, and what the research shows happens when this becomes normal for you over the years. Then we'll come back to the big question, is sitting all day actually worse for your health than smoking? Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to The Wellness Method so you never miss another one of your favorite science-backed health videos. So what actually begins to change in your body after just a few hours of sitting? When you sit for long periods of time, your body doesn't just rest, it shifts into a less metabolically active state. One where some of your largest muscles, especially in your legs, become less active. When you move, these large muscles act like a kind of metabolic engine. When they contract, they help your body use and regulate energy more efficiently. But when you're sitting for long stretches, that system slows down. And one of the first measurable effects is in how your body handles blood sugar after you eat. In controlled studies, researchers have found that when people sit continuously after a meal, their blood sugar and insulin responses tend to be higher compared to when that sitting is broken up with short bouts of movement. Even something as simple as getting up and moving every 30 minutes has been shown to improve how the body processes glucose. Which means the issue isn't just your total movement in a day, it also matters how long you stay still. Now, this doesn't mean that one day at your desk is suddenly dangerous. Your body is resilient, but it does mean that your body is already responding in real time to how much or how little you move. And if those long stretches of sitting start to happen every day, that's when the pattern can start to add up. So how do researchers actually measure what that means? For a long time, scientists had to rely on people estimating how much they sat each day. And as you can probably imagine, those estimates were not always accurate. More recently, researchers have started using wearable devices to measure movement and sedentary time more precisely. And once they did, a clearer pattern began to emerge. Sitting does matter, and more sitting is generally associated with higher health risk. Research now shows that people who sit for long stretches each day have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and heart failure. When you sit for hours, your leg muscles, especially in the calves, contract much less, which slows blood returning to the heart and can contribute to reduced circulation in the lower body. That slows blood flow, especially in the legs, and can promote blood clotting problems, higher blood pressure, and early atherosclerosis. At the same time, prolonged sitting reduces the activity of an enzyme that makes nitric oxide, a chemical that keeps your blood vessels flexible and able to widen. When your vessels become stiffer, blood pressure rises and endothelial function declines, both of which are major drivers of heart disease and heart failure. Sitting for long stretches also lowers energy expenditure and muscle activity, which over time can contribute to weight gain, insulin resistance, and metabolic syndrome, leading to higher blood sugar, higher triglycerides, lower good HDL cholesterol, and higher blood pressure, all of which further raise the risk of atherosclerosis, heart attacks, and heart failure. Even if you exercise, sitting more than about 9 to 11 hours per day still exposes your body to these vascular and metabolic stresses for most of the day, which is why studies find people who sit more than roughly 10 to 11 hours per day can have about a 40 to 60% higher risk of heart failure and cardiovascular death, even when they meet standard exercise guidelines. A highly sedentary lifestyle can lead to type 2 diabetes by quietly disrupting how your body handles glucose and insulin. When you sit for long periods, your large muscles barely contract, so they burn far less glucose and pull less sugar out of the bloodstream, which means the same amount of insulin becomes less effective at moving glucose into cells. Over time, this drives insulin resistance, forcing the pancreas to pump out more insulin to keep blood sugar under control. Eventually, that constant demand can overwork the pancreas, leading to declining insulin production and higher fasting blood sugar. At the same time, sedentary behavior lowers energy expenditure, promoting weight gain and unhealthy fat accumulation, especially around the liver and abdomen, which further worsens insulin resistance and raises triglycerides, while chronic low-grade inflammation and oxidative stress also impair insulin signaling. Experimental studies show that even a few days of inactivity can rapidly increase insulin resistance and worsen post-meal blood sugar and lipid levels. And large prospective studies find that people who sit more have a higher incidence of type 2 diabetes, independent of how much they exercise. In people who already have type 2 diabetes, breaking up prolonged sitting with short resistance or walking breaks has been shown to acutely lower post-meal glucose and insulin levels, confirming that prolonged sitting itself is a key driver of the metabolic pattern that leads to type 2 diabetes. A highly sedentary lifestyle can increase the risk of certain cancers because it promotes weight gain, visceral fat, and chronic inflammation, all of which can create a more favorable environment for cancer cells to grow. Large studies show that people who sit more have a higher risk of colon, endometrial, lung, pancreatic, and some hormonally driven cancers, and that even among those who exercise, long sitting times are linked with worse cancer outcomes and higher rates of cancer-related death. Which raises an important question. If sitting this much is associated with real health risks like heart disease and early death, does regular exercise reduce these risks? The short answer is that exercise does reduce risk, but it does not fully erase the metabolic and cardiovascular effects of prolonged sitting. Large cohort studies show that people who meet the recommended 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week have a substantially lower risk of early death, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes than those who are less active, even when both groups spend a lot of time sitting. Some meta-analyses suggest that about 20 to 30 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity per day may offset the higher mortality risk linked with sitting 8 to 10 hours per day. But here's the catch. Even people who exercise enough can still face higher cardiometabolic and mortality risks if the rest of their day is dominated by very long, uninterrupted sitting bouts. In multiple studies, high sedentary time remains an independent risk factor, often described as an added risk layer on top of low activity. In fact, the most protective pattern is a two-pronged approach, meeting current physical activity guidelines and breaking up sitting time throughout the day with short bouts of standing, walking, or light movement. These interruptions are linked to better post-meal glucose control, improved endothelial function, and lower long-term disease risk. So while exercise is powerful, it does not give you a free pass to sit for 10 or 12 hours straight, which means the real question isn't just how much you move, it's also how long you stay still. So now we come back to our original question. Is sitting all day really worse than smoking? Based on the evidence, the answer is a clear no. And in fact, the comparison isn't even close in magnitude. Large epidemiologic reviews comparing sitting and smoking show that the most sedentary people have about a 20 to 25% higher risk of dying from any cause than the least sedentary, even after accounting for other factors. In contrast, current smokers have about 2 to 3 times higher risk of death, and heavy smokers can have 4 times higher risk or more compared with people who have never smoked. That's the equivalent of hundreds of extra deaths per 100,000 people per year for heavy smoking, versus only about 20 extra deaths per 100,000 when comparing the highest sitting and lowest sitting groups. Some researchers have tried to put numbers in the same language. One analysis estimated that sitting 8 or more hours per day is roughly comparable to the mortality risk of obesity or light smoking, like about 10 to 15 cigarettes per week, not regular daily smoking. Another noted that the most sedentary people gain only about 4 to 6 minutes of life back per day by becoming the least sedentary, while smokers lose about 9 to 20 years of life on average, depending on how much they smoke. In terms of what actually goes wrong in the body, smoking damages the lungs, heart, blood vessels, and multiple organs in a profound, direct way, raising the risk of lung cancer, heart attacks, strokes, and COPD. Sitting raises the risk of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers, but its effect is more gradual and can be partly offset by enough physical activity and breaking up sitting time. Studies show that about 60 to 75 minutes of moderate activity per day can substantially reduce the higher mortality risk of long sitting periods, while no amount of exercise makes smoking safe. If we boil all of this down into one takeaway, it would be this. Prolonged sitting quietly shifts your body toward higher risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certain cancers, and even earlier death. But the idea that it's worse than smoking simply doesn't hold up next to the numbers. The real lesson is that how long you sit every day matters, not as a dramatic life or death equivalent to cigarettes, but as a built-in, almost invisible risk layered into the way most people live and work. How many hours per day do you spend sitting? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you're subscribed to The Wellness Method. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.